Welcome to the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast, where power, politics, and the world's most coveted materials collide. Rare earth elements power the backbone of tomorrow's most critical technologies. With China dominating global production, the U.S. and its allies must align strategically to ensure a stable future. This urgency prompted tech entrepreneurs Daniel O'Connor and Dustin Olson to launch Rare Earth Exchanges, a news and insight platform built to equip stakeholders and decision makers with the tools and intelligence needed to reduce dependency and build prosperous resilience. Let's get into it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to yet another episode of the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast. I'm Dustin, joined by my co-host Daniel, and today we have Andy Thompson, who is the CEO of Meteoric Resources, an Australian-based company. And Andy brings over 30 years of international finance and operations experience across the mining sector. Andy, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks very much, Dustin. Just one correction there. I'm not the CEO. I'm the CFO.
My mistake. I've done that already. Yes, CFO. Yes. Thank you for being on the show, and thanks for that correction. Andy, we would love just a quick synopsis of what has led you to Meteoric, and also where does Meteoric sit today? And I guess, what is the elevator pitch for the Caldera project that you guys are currently operating out of Minas Gerais in Brazil?
Yeah, sure. And thank you both for the invitation. Meteoric is an ASX listed company based in Australia with a project in state of Minas Gerais, Brazil, which is a fantastic address to be operating. Minas Gerais is known as the mining state in Brazil. They've been successfully mining and creating new mines frequently, so it's a good address and a very strong, robust mining background and mining act and mining laws that make it quite easy to follow through the process in order to get through to permitting, which we can talk about later. But what is it? We've got the Caldera project, and just to talk around Caldera. Caldera essentially in Portuguese means cauldron. And why that's important is that our project is actually inside an extinct volcano. The volcano erupted some 100 million years ago. So you've had about 90 million years of weathering. And why that's important is inside the caldera, where you have the walls, the constant weathering has broken down the rocks, both chemically and physically, to give you a stable clay environment. So our resource is 100% clay. And the rare earth elements cling through positive attraction onto the clay lens, which makes the removal, I suppose, of the elements a much easier opportunity later on in the processing. The walls of the caldera, again, why that's important, it stops the lateral movement of the clay zones and it essentially reduces the amount of dilution of grade. In our time there, we essentially picked up the project back in late 2022, early 2023. We started drilling. We got our own drill rigs. We've done about 60,000 meters of drilling, 35,000 samples, done a lot of test work. And we've come up with a resource of about 1.5 billion tons. Let me just let that sink in. 1.5 billion tons at a grade of about 2,300 ppm. Early part of our mining schedule under the PFS will be pushing through a grade of about 4,000 ppm. Our time has been spent trying to understand the ore body, how it behaves, where the high grade zones are, and that we continue to do that. And with the ability to really put together a multi-decade, sustainable, environmentally friendly product that can form the start of the critical industry supply chain to the Western world. That's essentially my elevator pitch.
That's amazing. And so 1.5 billion tons is a big number. That's a lot. So with that, how is that affecting the conversations you're having with others in terms of like offtake agreements, things like that?
I think it's very important to understand that number one, we are really trying to, the Western world is desperately trying to grow out the supply chain. The supply chain hasn't been evident in total for a long, long time in the Western world. And when you're talking to downstream processing companies, what they're looking for is a long-term sustainable partner that they can rely on to deliver into their systems. People are putting these plants together for multi-decades. We can certainly do that. Bearing in mind, well, just another fact, we've only explored around 20% of our landhold. So we've explored 20%. We've already got 1.5 billion tons. It gives you an understanding of the scalability of the Caldera project itself. We can grow this thing out. So the plan at the moment is to put together a processing plant that can do about 6 million tons per annum. That's delivering into the market around about 13,500 tons of total rare earth oxides, about 20,000 tons of MREC per annum. The size of this, when you're talking to downstream partners, they want to understand that this isn't a flash in the pan. This is not a 5-year opportunity. This can create absolute long-term, reliable offtake to really solidify and begin that, as I mentioned, the supply chain. There's probably 4 major parts. There's the mining to MREC. Then there is the separation to oxides, metallization to alloys, and magnetization. So there's like 4 industries in total to get to your magnets. We could easily underpin the beginning of that. And of course, as a business, Meteoric is also looking at where do we go and how far do we go down the downstream. Now, that's looking a little bit in the future. The first cab off the rank, our first initiative really is to get the MREC processing plant licensed, constructed, and into production. And our goal is to try and do that in 2028, by 2028.
So great, and it's great to have you, Andy. And again, it's a very important project. Let's take a step back for a minute. We're seeing quite a few projects in the Western or ex-China, Western world, United States, Australia, except Brazil. And at the same time, these high-end magnets that are key instrumental for everything from defense to robotics to other high-tech products, electric vehicles, require heavy rare earths. And currently, today, I think it's important that everybody understand that probably about 98%, somewhere up there in that range of heavy rare earths remained separated and refined in China. And within that number, a good deal of those inputs come from Myanmar. And so, we're in a very precarious situation. And, we have this ranking system, and we have algorithms that keep these supply chain players ranked based on a number of factors. And you all are in that ranking for the heavy rare earths. We look at that. So we see the criticality of this asset, okay, because of that. But let's talk about some key milestones that investors can understand how to understand the company, where it's at in its life cycle, and what are the key success milestones. So whether it's a feasibility study, pilot processor, can you delineate those so that investors watching can understand that?
Absolutely. Thanks, Daniel. And importantly, yes. So not every rare earth project is the same. They're all different. There's 17 rare earth elements in what is termed a basket. And some, unfortunately, don't have the heavies. And that is evident around the track. We are very fortunate. Our basket includes both the heavies and the lights. So we've got a very good composite basket, and it's all in clay. And that's also important. We'll talk about that later, because the clay, the extraction of the rare earths out of the clay versus the hard rock is a much simpler and cheaper economic equation. And that's important when you are challenging, as you mentioned, China. The vast majority of the rare earths coming out of China, as you said, coming from Myanmar and the ionic clay reserves of China, and that's their cheap production. That's how they can manage to force down the pricing. We can compete. Quite frankly, we can compete. Now that's fantastic. Where are we? 24, we came up with our scoping study last year, delivered or published our pre-feasibility study, which came up with the 6 million tons per annum. As I mentioned, 15,500 tons of TR, total rare earth oxides. Inside that, there's around about 4,000, just over 4,000 tons of NdPr. Why that's important? That's the magnetics, the light magnetics. That equates to around about 10 to 11,000 tons of sintered magnets per year. The US demand, my understanding, is around about 10 to 12,000 tons of sintered magnets per annum. So let's go back in the story. What are we going to be producing on an annualized basis? Around about 4,000 tons of NdPr annually for decades. And this is project number one. We have scalability. We can increase this, but we need to get up and running. We need to get up to running quickly and stop pushing the product to market. The 4,000 tons, when you look at converting that and using, just standard metrics that are available on the internet, it'll tell you that 4,000 tons of NdPr will give you about 11,000 tons of sintered magnets. Magnets are what everybody's on. So conceivably, the Caldera could essentially be the feedstock for the supply chain. We've got import in Brazil. You wanted to know where we are. Brazil has 3 major milestones for licensing and permitting. The first one is the environmental permit, which in Brazil is called the LP. This is the most exhaustive license to get. As you can imagine, it impacts, it's not only environmental, but it's your social license to operate. And you really need to do a good job in the study work in order to get this through the licensing process. And I suggest that we did that particularly well. We received our license in back end of December or 21st, I think, of December last year. It was a wonderful Christmas present for us to get. So that is an unrestricted license. All right. So we've got the license, we move forward. Once you have the LP or the environmental license, you move on to what in Brazil is called the LI, license to implement or construction license. This is more of a technical license. What are you building? How are you building it? What does it look like? Does it comply with all the standards and regulations within Brazil? We submitted our paper on that a couple of months ago, and last month, and we expect that to take up to 6 months. So we're looking Q3 for the license to implement, or the construction license permit to be delivered. Back in Australia and with our counterparts in Brazil, it's a tandem effort. We are doing our DFS, definitive feasibility study, and that's now taking the PFS detail and really putting it through the ring and understanding exactly what this plant looks like. The capex for the plant in the PFS was around $450 million. As a finance guy, it's a kind of number I focus on. It is the capital expenditure to put the project together. I keep focus on that and try get the guys to make sure we still deliver to that value or thereabouts. There are some variables which we can't, Daniel, unfortunately manage. For example, exchange rates. I mean, the best will in the world, you can't mitigate against the change of that. But nonetheless, we're focusing on the DFS, which we hope to get out by mid-year this year. So it's all about hurdles.
Yep. Sorry to interrupt you. It's very important. So this is very helpful, I think, for the audience to understand, especially investors looking at stages. The DFS, could you walk us and the audience a little bit more through what that is? What is the DFS? What does it constitute? Why is it important? Once you have it, once you have it done, what is the implication?
Sure. DFS simply is a de-risking study. There's probably 3 in normal terms. There's probably 3 studies people go through. A scoping study, which is a very high level, a lot of thumb sucking and experience motivated numbers being put in, and it's got an accuracy of about 45%. That's called a scoping study, which we went through. In fact, we did 2 scoping studies. And the studies start right from the mining, where you mine, how you mine, how much it's going to cost you to mine, the moving of the mine product to the process plant, the construction of the process plant, the work flow of the process plant itself. So you feed the ore into the process plant, and all the costs associated to extracting the rare earth oxides or MREC are I suppose, evaluated based on what kind of workflow you look at. Now, it's important to understand why the ionic absorption clay product resource is different to hard rock. My chairman mentioned this once before. The rare earth elements actually cling to a clay lens at microscopic level. What it looks like, pretty much the flat surface with these pebbles of rare earths attached to it on the surface. And it's positively attached, right? It's sort of a chemical process. We then wash that. So there, in the mining side, there's no drill blast because it's clay. You just simply dig it up. At the process plant, there's no crushing or grinding because it's clay. You throw it, there's a bit of screening, push it through the plant, and you wash it with ammonium sulfate. The ammonium sulfate replaces the rare earth elements. The rare earth elements come off into a solution. We precipitate that to an MREC, mixed rare earth carbonate. It's like a white product. We then we extract as much water and ammonium sulfate out of the solution so that the spent clays are now getting dried out a little bit, and we try and put that back into the void of the mine where we just took it out of. So it's a full loop. You take it out of the ground, you put it through the process plant, you dry it off a bit, and you put it back in the ground. All of that needs to be studied. That's what the PFS studies are all about. It's understanding, what does that plant look like? How much does it cost to put together? How much does it cost to actually process and feed the stuff at 6 million tons per year? We've got power, we've got reagents, we've got human beings, and everything that goes around a mine. You know, I often refer to it as pretty much like an orchestra, right? An orchestra, you've got all these different instruments left, right, and center that may or may not sound quite good on their own, but when you put them together, is an amazing sound. So you've got this mine, which starts with the ore body, goes through a processing plant. That is all done at study level through scoping. PFS is a margin of error, I believe, around 30%. There is an engineering standard of that. DFS, definitive feasibility study, the margin is around about 15% accuracy. So Daniel, what we've done is taken the study work, and we've used an external company called Ausenco. We've got operations globally, but importantly, they've got operations.
Andy, what was the name of the company?
It's a company called Ausenco.
Okay.
They're a tier 1 consulting company with offices in Brazil. And that's important because at the DFS stage, we're now trying to understand what are the costs inside Brazil. It's pointless taking an economic study of an arbitrary or similar mine in Australia and trying to use the same numbers. It's got to be relevant to the environment within which you operate. And we are wholly in Brazil. I mean, currently we've got over 60 staff there. We've got a great crew. We've got, we're building up the technical understanding and the subject. So we're using Ausenco as one of our partners to build the definitive feasibility study under our control, using their teams in Brazil. So we understand at the end of the day, how much it's going to cost us to build it, how long it's going to take to build it, what does it look like, and how do we operate it? And all of those combined gives us an economic study called a definitive feasibility study that has got such a reasonable accuracy. You can then take that to financial intermediaries to essentially go for your debt or your equity to raise funds in order to put the project together.
So just on that note, once for a mining venture such as Meteoric, once you have this feasibility study, it probably is a trigger for financing or, for partnerships, right? Would you say that's a major trigger point?
Yeah. again, Daniel, we internally, we've got a very robust, strict control mechanism. I think one of the success milestones, I suppose, that we look at ourselves is how we have, right from the get-go, we have set up a series of steps, de-risking steps, that allow us to go through ultimately to get to the construction or production phase. Each of these are well thought out, and they work pretty much like a series of dominoes. You need to do the study work in order to get the information to do the next part of the study. Where we're at the moment, of course, we're now got the team doing the DFS. We've also got a bunch of us looking at offtake partners globally. These are the people who, in the first instance, will be taking our product into their systems and their processes, and they will be, if you take an MREC product, for example, they need to take that to separate the mixed rare earth carbonate. So that's the mixture of all 17 elements. The next step down the chain will be an organization that will essentially separate those into the oxides that can be used by different industries. And in a lot of instances, we're talking about the magnetics. So the juggle at the moment is we need to do this feasibility study. We need to get offtake partners. Now, the offtake partner conversation is one that boils. It's obviously in the top of everyone's tongue at the moment. What's going on? Where are we getting supply from? Who can we get it from? We are fielding our pilot plant, which has been operational in Brazil since December. It's a wonderful way. Number one, it's proving that it's not just a concept, it's now real. We can do it. We can do it consistently. We're producing MREC that goes to the off-takers for their analysis, but also gives us the optionality to see what do we want to do down the line. And then with that the project, the pilot plant, our offtake partners and interested parties down the cycle can come to site. They can physically see it in operation. They can meet the teams. They can meet the people that physically are going through it, and get their sample, take it back, have a look, what they need to it, and we can then start to, from a MOU, memorandum of understanding, into binding agreement. So again, that's going to occur sometime this year.
And Andy, sorry, just to interject, and
sure.
Sorry to interrupt you. It's important. The pilot facility that's in Brazil is, I believe, it was $300 million effort. Is that true?
Oh no. And so the pilot plant probably cost us in total about $2 million to put together.
Okay.
It is a mini pilot, right?
Where do we see that number? We saw a $300 million number, I remember, associated with that effort. Maybe that's, well, either way. So it's nowhere near that number. You have that built up, you have that developed, and you're producing pilot output that allows you to get a better understanding. You can show off-takers. That's very exciting that you're at that stage.
Yeah, one of not many. I'm not too globally who've got a pilot plant in operation that you can go and see and touch and understand and see the process. Most of the operations globally, Western ones, are hard rock operations, which are completely different to ours. Right? There's a different process. And there's been a lot of skepticism that we could pull this off. I think the naysayers were going, you can't, it will never work. Well, actually it does work. It works. We've got it going. We are producing MREC. And I go back to nothing. All the people in Brazil are our own staff now. The education, the quality, the skills, the growth of them is all a hands-on tools. This is wonderful. Our research and development teams are exploding. We're understanding, and this is very important, right? Very, very important. Let's not forget the geology. We were gifted by this anomaly globally of an ionic absorption clay, which is stuck inside a volcano, cannot move. There are very few, if any, globally that can match the grade and the recoverability of the original source resource. They don't come, these are rare. These are the Witwatersrand of the gold world. This is what this represents. And it's in the Caldera, and we've only explored 20% of it. So the rarest you can find.
Now, on that note, I was going to ask you, though, with some of the light rare earths, the monzonite, you can have thorium. Is there any radioactive components to this? And if so, I would imagine you have a process to work with it, mitigate it.
It's a good question, Daniel. And again, I'm not a metallurgist, but my understanding, the radionuclide values are way, way below international standards. We don't even need to register it as a radioactive material when you
Really?
ship it internationally. So yeah, absolutely. As again, this is a freak of nature. We've got the license to explore and develop. Someone called it a unicorn once. Beautiful. We'll take that moniker.
So Andy, so you're saying, again, sorry to interrupt, but you're saying that the MREC that's produced from the mine can be shipped pretty much as a normal geological product and not a radioactive product. Wow. I think that's not always the case. So that's very nice.
Yeah. We have got we've sent samples to a number of jurisdictions that got sticky on the radionuclide balance.
Right.
I can't remember what numbers are. We've just gone through an exercise now where we've had some double checking on that and got certification, and they've been sent off. So, yeah, the outcome. And look, very happy to field calls or questions that we can hand to our metallurgists that they can give a little bit more detail. There is stuff on our website and on our PFS documentation that talks around this. The original study work was done through ANSTO, which is the Australian Science Technology Organisation. They're the guys that are sort of number one, number two in the world for this sort of study work. So it's very reputable. And we're very, very happy with the outcome. And as mentioned, we are now replicating what they did in the labs on site in Poços de Caldas, which is the local village, local town, so to say, where our research and development factory is.
So, okay, so I have a few more questions, but Dustin, please jump in. I don't want to monopolize the time, and I definitely have a few more to jump into associated with the separation. But please.
Yes. So, Andy, you were talking about the 3-stage environmental licensing process in Brazil. I was curious to know, from your experience throughout your career, what is it like working with Brazil and going through that process compared to maybe some other countries?
Good question. I would say the mechanisms in the process, the local, municipal, state, and federally, are very well embedded. There have been, there are so many mines in Minas Gerais, for example, that have been created over time. It's a well-trodden pathway to get these permits. What we have to do, as I suppose foreigners inside the country, is understand what the requirements are. Do the work. We've spent, as I mentioned earlier, I think we've done 50,000 meters of drilling, loads of samples, loads of metallurgy test work, the environmental permitting test work to do with monitoring and such. We did it. We did it to the level and the scope as required. Now, if you follow these steps as it's stated, and you put the documentation together, and you're very good at essentially putting these steps together in a formal format that delivers to their expectations, well, then you go into this process that really does facilitate the startup of operations. We are also a bit gifted because the strategic minerals, as they're called in Brazil, were given a priority status, and we as a company got priority status for some of our permitting. It doesn't mean you can do any less work. What it does mean is when you submit your paperwork, you are put to the priority, you put to the top of the queue, so you get the people look at the process first. So how do I feel Brazil is comparative to the rest of the world? Well, I would suggest it is far more efficient than Australia, number one. I don't think you'd be able to do this in the same time scale. In fact, I know you wouldn't be able to do it in Australia. I think it's got a very, very experienced series of departments that are used to going through this process, and they are efficient. They're very good with their communication, and ultimately the reward for the effort comes by getting the permit on time.
It's great to hear. So we talk about here on the show too that the time from start to production for a mine is about 17 years. is that a similar timeline? I mean, Brazil sounds like a dream, but what does that timeline look like compared to what you guys are building out?
Well, let's take ourselves. We picked up the project back in 2022. We got the license areas to explore, and did the deal with them in 2022. We started on the ground. I think our chairman was our number one employee in 2023, and we quickly filled up the gaps to put a team together to push something. That's 2023. We bought our own drill rigs. We bought our own drilling specialist drill teams. So we threw them in there. We essentially motored through all those early stage exploration and feasibility studies. 24, I think, was when we did the scoping study. 25, we did the PFS licensing. We got the environmental license in 25. If we get the construction license in this year, and subject to funding, we could start constructing in this physical year. The construct is, and again, it's subject to how much money you want to throw at it, but it's about an 18-month to 2-year program. So 26, 27, 28, we could be in production 2028. That is world class. I doubt any jurisdiction globally outside of China, for example, would allow and facilitate putting together a mine in that speed and comply with all the rules and regulations that are required. And I would say that some of the, when you talk around some of the rules about safety and adherence to managing safety protocols, they've got a very, very high standard. So there is no shortcutting this. Brazil just does it efficiently.
That's good to hear. It's really exciting.
It is. So jump back into this. So, and then I want to get into what the CapEx is and ultimately the OpEx. So we have 4 stages in the mine to metal supply chain. We have
pretty much
mine to MREC, okay? And that's where you all are, and you have this very valuable deposit, especially with the heavy rare earths, which are difficult to access and currently monopolized in China. So that's very, very important. And you're in the process of refining that and getting to a point where you'll, through that final report that we discussed, you'll be in a place to really understand the economics of the asset. Then the separation, I'm assuming this will happen on premise. I'm assuming it will, right? Or is that a wrong assumption?
At the moment, our project, the first project we're doing is simply to produce an MREC output, which is a mixed rare earth carbonate. And we will then be selling that on to off-takers who will then separate that. So we won't, the initial phase of this project, which we're talking about, is to deliver an MREC product into the market, into the Western supply chain.
Got it.
Of course, we're producing our own MREC currently. And we're doing some study work around separation. Now, separation, again, just to make it a little bit more muddy, separation comes in multiple different flavors. You can have what people call first cut or rough cut separation, which is essentially it removes quite a lot of the non-valuable parts of your basket, and this could be done reasonably. When I say reasonably, engineering and metallurgy needs to occur, but this could occur reasonably easily. Then you go down to the more I suppose, more focused area where you're trying to separate your magnetics, so NdPr, DyTb. A lot more effort and time there. That is not on our specific radar at the moment. It is not on in our PFS or our DFS. We're focusing on MREC. Are we looking at as what should we do strategically? Absolutely, Daniel. We're a growing business. We have the starter of it all, right? We've got the beginning of the supply chain. It would be remiss of us as executives not to be looking at and saying, where does the value of our operation extend to?
Right. Yes, because if you were able to do that, the valuation of the company would skyrocket, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. It'll be valuable to get MREC with the requisite heavy rare earths. That would be very, very valuable, and just more valuable. The metallization, that's a different ball game, and then the magnet. Now, as far as I believe I think you had a partnership with Ucore, at least
Correct.
a MOU. So you're looking at the partnerships. Is that being done? Do you do that when you go and do the business development work for that for a company that's at this stage? Is it more opportunistic and your network, or is it more precision? Like, you nail down, you cull down exactly who you want to work with. How does that? Can you explain a little bit for folks how that works?
Sure. Look, I think it's fair to say if we had the same conversation 2 years ago, we would be scratching the surface to try and understand who are the businesses globally who actually are on the component parts downstream, the separators and such like. What has occurred in the last year as the profile of the rare earths and the criticality of the supply chain has become, is we've got so many more people, so many more opportunities in the market, not only in the US, but certainly there's a lot of activity in the US, which is massively exciting to us. And yes, we certainly did. We've got some MOUs with Ucore, with their Rapid SX, and Neo Performance Materials, which has a magnet making facility. So they go through the entire process to magnet making in Estonia, in Europe.
Yes.
We had early engagement with these guys, these teams, not only because of, they've been in the market a long time. In Ucore's, it was a great synergy, I think, with a great team, and we continue it. So very strong relationships with those guys. We're still building that out. We're still looking at where we can go with that. And, again, as I mentioned earlier on, in this year, it'll be time to finalize and get those agreements a little bit more tighter. But there are a number of similar businesses. I mean, you've got, for example, MP Materials, a very well-known US company who really could do with some, I suppose, feedstock with heavies. And a number of organizations. There's a number of organizations throughout the US who we are talking to. I can't give our names, but we're delivering them MREC. They've been to site. We've all had a good look. And we are starting to open conversations about where are the synergies. And I guess when you start to talk at that level, Daniel, you start looking at is what is their objective? What is their vision? And does it dovetail with our vision? Our vision is to
100%. No, Andy, we have this thesis called the Great Powers Era 2.0, and that is that we're sort of entering into a new phase of modern history. And part of that is going to be defined. Power is going to be in part defined by your supply chains. And you're seeing it now. Different nations and groups of nations and companies configuring themselves to build out these supply chains that can help whichever society really navigate the next 20, 50 years. So I think it's an enormous opportunity for your company.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. When you look at the size of the Caldera project, let's go back to what we said right at the opening stanza here was 1.5 billion tons. Just put that into, how long this thing could and should be operational for our children's children, right? That's how big this thing is. It is enormous, and it can, if treated well, if looked after, if developed, it is multi-generational. Let's focus on the here and now. It's certainly multi-decade. We want to be in partnerships with organizations that have the ability, the desire, the wisdom, and the dynamics to also go for the long haul. Now, there is great technologies coming up. I mean, separation, for example, has been around for decades upon decades. It was shifted across from US and Europe, plonked in China and left there. And of course, the IP grew there. But that's not the only way to separate rare earths. There are multiple, and UCOR is a classic, right? There are multiple partnerships. We're also in a partnership with MTM, Metallium, and they've got this flash Joule heating, which is based out of the US. This it would be a game changer if we can assist them getting product so they can essentially continue their test work to build that out at a scale that could join into the supply chain. So it's a wonderful opportunity. What we deliver is consistent, high quality, heavy and light feedstock into the market for the other players to take advantage of.
No, I think it's quite exciting. If we look at the investment that is going to be needed to execute, let us just say we're 2028 and you're starting to supply that MREC that's going to be used in, whether it's defense or automotive or what have you. How far along are you in your financing journey to ensure that that's in place?
Good point. I suppose I'd like to say we do not want to strike early. We're developing the package. We're developing the value proposition. There's got to be a healthy balance of debt and equity. There's a lot of, I suppose, de-risking parts. The DFS and the LI are part of that. And we're talking to a number of parts. So the strategics, we look at every facet of financial support we're looking at and not discounting any at the moment. The opportunities, we're in a wonderful situation where I think we're getting much more global marketing coverage because of simply what we stand for. The business, the management team, the ore body, and the development so far has essentially pivoted us to a point where we are a valuable opportunity. Now we need to find our partners. And that mixture, and from the finance background, we need to find a really healthy, well-balanced funding solution that gives us the opportunity not only to get up and running as quick as possible. That's important, but it's not the only thing. We also have to look at our own expansion requirements, and we want to join and have partners who are going to facilitate that opportunity to expand. So there is no right answer to you there, Daniel, other than we're very much in those conversations at the moment. I'm very excited about the next step going forward. And this year, 2026 for us is a major pivotal year because it's a confluence of a lot of activities. Go back to the orchestra where you've got these different areas that are going to come together to make the whole. Instead of parts, it's going to become the whole. So you've got the feasibility studies, you've got the permitting studies, you've got the marketing, the offtakes, the financing, all coming in one big solution in this year, which is busy. We do a lot of traveling. MD will be across in the States again later this month. And I'll be in Brazil later this month, but it's an exciting project. It's wonderful to be part of.
That's all very exciting, Andy. And you guys have a lot going for you in terms of size of the project, the speed in which you'll probably hopefully able to get into production. And a lot of people will be interested in what you're doing, and just being able to supply them with what they need. It's really exciting. And we hope to have you on the show in the future to give us an update as you guys progress and get even closer to your big milestones in the future. Andy, for those that are interested in maybe getting involved with what Meteoric is doing, what is the best place for them to go to connect?
Look, of course, you can send me an email. Our website has a lot of information about what we're doing, and we try and keep that up to date as much as possible. All three, the chairman, myself, and the managing director, go to as many conferences. So reach out. If you want to speak to one of us, please feel free to reach out on our email addresses. We'd love to have a chat with people. If there's additional questions, field them through yourself. I'm happy to do that, and we can get whichever technical specialist. We've got a wonderful in-house technical team, some of the best guys in the rare earth industry globally that are supporting us, which is fantastic to have. And we'll just answer as they come through. So you reach out. We're more than happy to chat.
Absolutely. So your website, just for those that are listening, is meteoric.com.au. Go there for more information and to connect.
Yes.
Andy, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your wealth of knowledge, not only about the Caldera project, but also your experience as well throughout your tenured career. Hope to have you back.
I was just going to say one last thing, Dustin. This is one of the few credible ex-China ionic clays with heavy rare earth plays out there. So kudos, congratulations for making it this far. You're part of the process of liberating supply chains, and that's why we exist.
Thank you. We're very proud. We're proud of the project. We're proud of the team, and we really are excited for this year. So thank you very much for having me on today.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.